Make sure your insurance doesn't come up short. Get gap cover with ALA. For more information, follow the links in the description.
Hello everybody. If you're looking for an exciting but affordable sports car to get you through the summer and maybe beyond, you need to buy yourself a Mazda MX-5. But if for whatever reason you've got it in your head that you have to have yourself a Porsche and you're on a limited budget, well, as far as I'm concerned, there is only one car you should be buying, and that is this. Specifically, I am talking about the 2005 987 generation Boxster S. And in this video, I'm going to be telling you why, if you buy anything else, you're mad. Now, I hope this might be the same for you, wherever in the world you may be, but there is just something about the weather coming out and being behind the wheel of a convertible sports car that just makes me intensely happy. More specifically, with this particular car, I'm just so thankful for all of the many friends that I have, and this little vehicle here is a great example of just how fortunate I am in that regard. So, it belongs to my good buddy Chris, who over the last few days has been helping me out around the house and with filming, and we've got to know each other through the magic of YouTube, like just about every single one of my other friends that I have. This car he picked up last year. I went with him to look at it and to collect it. Then, earlier in this year, he went and got the wheels refurbished, courtesy of my new friend James over at Wheelhouse Alloys in Ipswich. And I gotta say, I think they look magnificent in this bronze against the metallic blue paint, and go very nicely with this absolutely stunning cocoa extended leather interior. And naturally, before we collected it, we also got our friends at CarVertical to do a search to make sure that it is the car it was supposed to be and wasn't hiding any nastiness in its past. Because when it comes to used car dealers, I would say trust but verify. And finally, I'd like to say a magnificent thank you to my good friend Ben over at Mile by Mile Valeting, who's done a lovely job getting the car nice and clean, though I should point out that between him cleaning it and me getting my statics, I did drive it a fair bit. We did, though, get some very, very nice still shots of it just after it had been done, which show off, I think, just how good this car looks. And should you be anywhere in central England or the three counties and you'd love to support an enthusiast-run business, please give him a line. I'll put his details in the description down below. He's been looking after all of my cars, so I'm sure he'll do a good job with yours. The Boxster is a car that I think people either hate or love. Now, some people will hate it just because it's got a Porsche badge on it, and you know what? I can understand the many, many reasons why you just feel this is something you never want to buy. However, I wager if you have clicked on this video, you've probably got a bit of an interest in the brand. Although, if you're about to hop into the comment section and tell me, James, you doofus, don't you know it's pronounced Porsche? Yes, I do. Only here in Britain, we've always called it Porsche. That's what I've called it for the last 35 years. And if I ring Porsche HQ over at Reading, they'll answer the phone and say, "Hello, Porsche." Or on occasion, they'll just go, "Oh, not you again." And I've got to be honest, right? Okay, I have to get this off my chest, okay? What I find fascinating is I think it's usually Americans that are so particular about the pronunciation. And it's only ever with Porsche. Never had it with any other car brand ever. No Ferrari fan, Lamborghini fan, Renault, Citroen, Fiat, Lancia. No one has ever told me you're saying it the wrong way. No one has ever said, "Oh, you dolt, it's Lancia, don't you know?" Or it's Ferrari or Lamborghini. No, they just don't do that. But Porsche types, they like doing that. And what gets me is that, oh, nice old Trevor, what gets me is that these are Americans that also pronounce Renault, Renault, and Jag as Jaguar. The heck is a Jaguar? And at the end of the day, you knew exactly what it is I was talking about, didn't you? I mean, what next? Do you want me to start calling the 911 the 9 Alpha? Come on, get over yourselves. You are gatekeepers to your brand, and you are ruining the fun for everybody. But I think it's fair to say there are a lot of Porsche fans, probably the ones that say it's Porsche, don't you know, that dislike the Boxster more than people that just don't like Porsche in general. And I think that's because, certainly when it launched, it was effectively half of a 911. In fact, from this bit forwards, it was a 911, and people didn't like that. They didn't like that because it cheapened their mighty flagship. From the front, you could barely tell a Boxster and a 911 apart. And I'm sure it didn't help that the 996 overall was a fairly unloved breed of 911 too. However, the 986 Boxster, and then subsequently the Cayenne, well, they saved the company. So as far as I'm concerned, they're all right by me. And as it happens, they're both really good cars. But if you want yourself a sports car for the summer, you're not going to want to buy a Cayenne. You can't afford a Macan for the kind of budget that we're talking about, which is, for the sake of argument, about £15,000. Or if you could find one for that little, please don't buy it. The same goes for a Panamera. And though 911s do exist, they're going to be of the scraggly variety. But please believe me when I say that my endorsement of the Boxster is not simply because it's the least worst of your choices. Oh no, it's because it's a darn good car, full stop. For this 987 generation, which was launched in 2004, deliveries really beginning in 2005, the car was much revised. They claim that only 20% of parts were carried over from its predecessor, but Porsche like doing that. They did it with the 968 versus the 944. And though I am certain that they have changed quite a bit, there's also a lot that they left alone. So fundamentally, the chassis here is basically the same as you got in the 986, and the engines are an evolution of the same again. But that's kind of okay, because the chassis is really good, and the engines, when they work, are fabulous too. Allow me to demonstrate. And I did all of that without even troubling the speed limit. On a day like today, this is just a fantastic car. Though I do apologise because that camera right behind me, I've got it on a little stick basically, and this is not the most rigid chassis. The camera is suffering. From in here, you don't really notice it all that much, but you have to understand what lies beneath this is near 30 years old now, and that means it delivers an old school driving experience, which is bad in terms of chassis flex, but is good in terms of things like steering feel, which here is very nice. It's quite light, as you'll often get in a mid-engined car, but beautifully feelsome, very interactive, and in terms of weighting, it strikes a nice balance between being light enough so you can use it on a daily basis, drive it around town, etc., etc., and heavy enough that it's fun when you want it to be. At launch, the 987S used a moderately revised version of the 3.2 litre engine which you got in the old 986S. That is then mated to a 6-speed manual gearbox, or 5-speed Tiptronic if you would like, and in the base model, which had the 2.7, you got a 5-speed. The gearbox is beautiful with a short throw, very direct, and this one has relatively little play in it. It's an absolute joy. And it has to be said, there are very few cars out there with the sheer breadth of ability that the Boxster has. Those that like it will point out, because it is mid-engined as opposed to the 911's rear-engined, the balance is even better, making it ever more playful, interactive, and enjoyable. And of course, there were always those out there that knew the Boxster was inherently a very, very capable car, deliberately pegged back so it didn't upset the 911 buyer too much. But that's just fine by me, because it means in the real world, this is a car that, generally speaking, has more chassis than it does engine. And especially if you're not familiar with this kind of thing, that's always the right way to have it. The brakes are generally pretty decent too, and should you fancy it, this is a car also fairly easy to take on track and do a light bit of work, have a bit of fun, and then drive yourself home. Or should the mood take you and you decide to drive down to the museum at Stuttgart, not most likely where this car was assembled. There is a small chance it was built down there, but more than likely at one of their other factories. I think these were assembled in Finland. One of the big upgrades for the 987 over the 986, and one of the many reasons that I recommend it, is the interior. With the 986, it just never felt quite good enough. Even when new, it was a bit plasticky, cheap feeling, and they don't really wear all that well. These, much nicer. Things sit in slightly more logical places. Everything feels a little bit nicer. And if you get one like this, with the gorgeous Cocoa extended leather, it looks fabulous. Alright, in Porsche tradition, the leather's not nice and soft. They just kind of glue it on top of the plastic, but it does look good. And then you have the Boxster's party piece. It's twin boots, a big one up front and a pretty darn good sized one at the back, making this an incredibly versatile car. You can take it to the shops or to the Riviera. Magnificent. And because of the way they've organised things, unlike a great many other convertibles, you do not lose or gain any boot space, roof up or down. Just last week, I spent a bit of time with the Ferrari Roma Spider, and the stuff I can get in here with ease to put in that roof down was very tricky indeed. Turning circles pretty good. Clutch, nice, light, easy, interactive. The Boxster is a brilliant car, but there's a good chance you already knew that. Why then is it I'm so particular about this one? Well, allow me, ladies, gentlemen, and everybody else, to show my workings. You want yourself a Porsche sports car. You've got a budget of £15,000. The fact you want a sports car rules out Cayenne, Panamera, and the Macan. The fact you've then only got a £15,000 budget limits you realistically to either a 996 or potentially 997 911 or a 986 or 987 Boxster and potentially Cayman. But personally, I think that any 911 at that price point is going to be a needy one, and so for that reason I would eliminate it. I know, there are those out there who want 911 or nothing else, but to me, just not worth the risk. The 986, likewise, I got a real soft spot for it, and you can pick those up at very good money. Around about £4,000 for a very cheap one, up to about £10,000 for the best of them. And if you're willing to live with the best of the 986s, then it's still a car that I would consider. But the 987 is much nicer and quite a bit newer. We bought a cheap 986 a while back, and I to date have spent triple its purchase price on trying to make it a decent one. And this is going to be the case for a great many 986s. The 987 doesn't command masses more money. Prices start at around about £7,000, going up to, well, beyond 20 for particular examples, but for the sake of today, 15 grand will get you a very, very nice one. However, you know why you haven't bought a Boxster, you know why you haven't bought a great many of these cars. That's their reputation for engine issues, IMS, RMS, and the daddy, bore score. Well, courtesy of my good friends at Hartech, they shared with me some inside information. And the key bit you want to know is the fact that for these early cars, both the 2.7 in the regular variant and the 3.2 here in the S have the early piston liners, iron ones, meaning they don't suffer bore score. They also have the newer flexible version of the rear main seal, which means that it shouldn't leak, thereby eliminating that problem. And they have the second generation of IMS bearing, the small single row, which is not as good as the later large single row, but it's better. And the big thing here is that should you need to replace it, upgrade it or whatever, you can do it without having to dismantle the entire engine, which you can't do with the later one, but that shouldn't be a problem because hopefully the later one will actually last.
And this is the really important bit. In late 2006, for the 07 model year cars, both engines were revised. In the 2.7, it gained 5 horsepower, but was otherwise unchanged, making it still a safe purchase. The S then received the larger 3.4-litre engine of the Cayman, bringing power from 280 horses up to 295. But it also inherited the Cayman's plastic piston coatings, which do suffer bore score. Of course, the ultimate way of avoiding these issues is by buying a second generation 987.2 car with the all-new engine, but those are again lots more money.
And that is why this specifically, the 3.2-litre variant of the Boxster S, is the one that I'd be after, because it has better performance than the regular one, a nicer gearbox. There are things that I still don't love about the car. The suspension is a bit too fidgety. I think these 19-inch wheels, which were fitted to this car from the factory, they don't look right on the car, and they certainly aren't doing the ride any favours. But these are things that can be fixed. But I do also want to stress the fact that though, no, these won't suffer bore score, they can still suffer from everything else that you might expect of any 20-year-old car. So, Chris picked this one up last year from JayEmm Motor Company, and at the time there were a couple of things that we knew about. First off, the exhaust had been patched to within an inch of its life, and the guy told us, by the way, at some point it is just going to need replacing, and to compensate for that, he gave Chris a bit of money off. The tyres, likewise, the previous owner of this car had replaced them, but the guy at JR had then replaced them again and put on some 10-year-old ones. Good brand, but old. So, of course, they needed doing too, and the price was adjusted to accommodate. However, only about 2 months in, the exhaust blew a hole in itself about that big. And so, to solve the problem, we put on the exhaust from my Cayman, which is now surplus to requirements. And that is why the E-Glide might have noticed that the tips on this don't look quite right, because they're not. Ultimately, Chris is going to put another exhaust on. We're not sure which one yet, but probably a valved one, so when he wants to be sensible, he can be, and then when he doesn't have to be. Most disturbingly, though, about a month ago, Chris was over at mine, took the car out, came back and said, it doesn't feel right. The suspension has been knocking for a little while, and these do that, and sometimes it needs sorting, sometimes you can kind of live with it, but it's an old car, right? Bushes, things like that, they go. Coffin arms, things like that, they're famous for them. But he said, here, try this, something's not right. I took the car out and the steering was all wobbly. And the top mount on the near side front, well, the insert basically just sheared out. The damper was just hanging there. That was disturbing. So that got fixed. The coolant sensor then failed. That had to be sorted. Not a big job, but an annoying one. And presently, the stereo down here has got a mind of its own. Fortunately, for the purposes of today, it's just off and it's behaving. But the last few times I've driven this car, it'll work just fine, and then suddenly you'll be stuck. Whatever station, whatever volume you've got, that's it. You're not going to be able to change it. That's frustrating. I also should point out that a great many Boxsters have had generally hard lives, and that's why I do really recommend a CarVertical. Mileage doesn't really concern me. You want a good ownership history, a good keeping of records, and preferably you want to buy privately so you can speak to the owner and work out if they are an enthusiast or just somebody that bought a car because they fancied a Porsche for the summer and had no idea what they were letting themselves in for. The car originally was about £12,000, but since purchase, in which time Chris has done something like 1,000 miles, it's already cost near £3,000, some of which has been covered by the dealer, some of which hasn't, and some of which was simply stuff Chris chose to do, like the alloy refurbishing. But if you are going to buy one of these, I would say that you do need to expect that kind of thing is going to happen. This is a danger, particularly when buying lower mileage examples. They're cars that haven't been out and about quite so much. This one's on just under 49,000 miles. That's really not a lot for a 20-year-old car. And so you do need to be wary of those owners who maybe just haven't driven their cars. Those will be the ones where the tyres may be falling apart. Things may have seized up, stuff might not be right, and they simply just don't know about it. Or maybe they definitely do, and that's why they're selling the car. And for the love of God, please don't buy one of these at auction. There are so many out there just being sold normally. You don't have to do it. I more or less guarantee you see this era of Porsche at auction, there's a damn good reason it's there. But in all honesty, there aren't many sports cars of this age I couldn't say similar things about, and I certainly wouldn't be put off buying one of these. Just go in, eyes open. Don't spend every penny you have just getting the car. Keep at least a couple of grand aside for making it a good one, and then it should really look after you. And believe me when I say, I know a lot of people with a lot of very, very nice cars. And we all generally agree there is not much better as an all-rounder than a Boxster. And if you want to buy one without breaking the bank and potentially your will to live, this is the one to have. This is the only cheap Porsche that I will ever buy. Other than the Cayman I got. But that's because I'm stupid. And I like doing these things. And that's proof of why you shouldn't buy a cheap one of those. Do as I say, not do as I do. Anyway, I want to say a big thank you to Chris for bringing his car out, and as ever to you for watching. Don't forget to hit the like button, comment down below, get in touch with Ben at Mile by Mile if you're in his area and you like your car very nicely valeted. And finally, I'll see you for the next one. Bye-bye.